Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today the case that I'm going to be talking about is known as the Allenstown 4 or the Bear Brook murders, and we've recently had a major update in the case as to the final identity of who was known as the middle child. She finally has got her name back after all of this time, which is just so lovely. And it's like 25 years after she was found at this point, so yeah, it's really nice for her to get her name back. She is Ray Rasmussen. My apologies if I say the name wrong. I don't actually mean to, but my pronunciation is really terrible. So just going back to the very beginning, it's the 10th of November in 1985 when a hunter discovered a metal 55-gallon drum, and inside of it were two bodies. This was in Bear Brook State Park in New Hampshire. The hunter wasn't the first person to come across the barrel either. A person called Jesse Morgan, he grew up in a small trailer park around Bear Brook. He was 11 when him and his friends stumbled upon the barrel. His friends had found it and they came up to him and they all thought it was really odd that there was a barrel in there, so they went up to it. It was blue, rusted, and it was like a steel drum sitting. It was like out of place in the woods. The brother that found the barrel went over and he tried to lift the lid off. When he did that, they were hit with the disgusting smell that was absolutely rank, and one of them pushed the barrel over. They watched the barrel fall on its side, and after that they all jumped and just legged it out of there because they were terrified. That was the last time that they saw it. Of course, at the time they didn't know that there were human remains inside of it. It would be 4 months on when they got the call from the police, from a hunter to the police, to say that he needed to meet them at the edge of the woods because he'd found something. He basically said, there's a barrel up in the woods and I think there's some bodies in there. So these bodies had been hidden inside the barrel. They were ruled as a homicide. It was determined that they died of blunt force trauma, and after an investigation and finding nothing, they would eventually be buried in a cemetery with, well, the only information that they knew about them, because they didn't actually know their identity, and that was put on their headstone. Now, 15 years later, a New Hampshire state trooper who was actually revisiting the scene made another shocking discovery, and there was another barrel there with another 2 bodies in it. It was only a short distance away from the first. It was believed that all four of them were connected and that they were just waiting to be found. Basically, despite doing their investigation after finding the first barrel, they only have like a certain scope of area to look in as the crime scene, and this second barrel was just outside of that scope, so they only searched the area within, I don't know what radius it was. That's why it wasn't discovered, despite it being so close. And again, everyone's cause of death was blunt force trauma. I put up an image that was released, like reconstruction, because I believe the bodies were skeletal when they were found. So yeah, here's the image. The adult was identified to be Caucasian, possibly Native American, about 22 to 33. She had curly or wavy brown hair, was between 5'2", 5'7". She had a lot of work on her teeth, like dental work. A few of her teeth had been pulled out, and she had lots of fillings. Now, the girl that was found with the adult female was between 5 and 11 years old. She didn't have any dental fillings or anything like that. Her hair was said to be wavy and light brown, and had a crooked front tooth along with gaps between her teeth on the top. She also had apparently symptoms of pneumonia. Now, the second barrel that was found, what would become known as the middle child, who has recently been identified, also had quite a big gap between her front teeth. She was between 2 and 4 age-wise. Again, brown hair, and also had an overbite, which was probably quite noticeable. She was suffering from anemia. The youngest girl found was between 1 to 3 years old. She had long light brown or blonde hair, and also had a gap between her 2 front teeth. In 2008, state police turned for help for identifying these victims, and this was from some place called NCMEC, who do really hard work in trying to identify unidentified victims, basically. In 2018, a tip helped to pinpoint the identities of 3 of the 4 victims, and then in 2019, advanced genealogy actually confirmed that the adult woman found, her name was Malise Honeychurch. And the other 2 children, not the middle child of course, were her young daughters Marie and Sarah. It was said that Marie was 8 to 10 years old at the time of her death. And obviously, when they identified the youngest child to be Sarah, it was said that she was 2 to 3 years old at the time when she was killed, having been 11 months old when she was last seen by her family, her extended family. It was said that Malise was last seen in November of 1978. This was in California, and she was introducing her new boyfriend to her family. Her new boyfriend was a man called Terry Rasmussen. So after all of that, after they introduced him and yada yada yada, the family never saw any of them ever again. It was said that her older sister, Pauline Hodges, actually mentioned the argument that she maybe had with her mom, and said that her mom said, "He's too old for you, why are you with him?" Something along those lines, and she went with Terry and they left, and they never called, and they were never seen again. At that time, she was 24 years old, but police do believe that it was 2 years later when she died, which would have made her about 26 to 27 when she died. And her family really did try and find her. Her brother David actually remembers what they did to try and find her and her daughters. But every time they looked, they came up against a dead end and more dead ends, and what more can you do if that's all you can find? Her mother would always say, she knew that something wasn't right, and where was she? And it was so sad because their sister and 2 nieces were just gone. And then, according to investigators, it was basically said that Terry was the main suspect in their murders. Everything that they did pointed to genetic genealogy as the way to try and sort of get her identity. They figured that if they found out who her family was, who her mother was, that they would finally be able to give her a name back. So they did. They worked on it for years and years and years, and then they got a critical lead in 2024. This was a possible mother to the child, and the woman was called Pepper Reed. Pepper Reed was last seen by her family in Texas around Christmas time in 1975. And at that time, she was actually pregnant. According to the family, Terry Rasmussen was the father. And then they said that after Christmas, Pepper actually went up and moved to California. And they never met Pepper's child or ever saw Pepper ever again. So they had identified Pepper as the potential mother. Not long after that, the DNA Doe project made another discovery, and this was a birth certificate from Orange County for a baby girl born in 1976, which was Ray Rasmussen. This birth certificate said that her parents were Terry and Pepper, which was all the confirmation that the investigators really needed. Because Ray was only between the age of 2 and 4 when she passed away, well, not passed away, when she was murdered, sorry. They couldn't find any pictures of her or anything like that, so sadly all they have is like the facial reconstructions. But they're so happy that now her case, now that she's been given her name back, she isn't just identified by sort of tragedy and what actually happened to her, she can finally be identified by the name that she was given. Now, of course, they have found out who Ray is, but they still have no idea where Pepper, her mother, is. It's assumed that probably she was another victim of Terry's. So police need anyone's help. They're looking at the whereabouts of what potentially happened to Pepper Reed. And like I said, she was last seen in the late 1970s. They are really looking for his movements between 1974 and 1985. And particularly in certain areas like New Hampshire, California, Arizona, Texas, Oregon, and Virginia. As it turns out, Terry Evans actually died in 2010. He was serving another sentence for something else that he did, but he'd actually been convicted under an alias that he made up, which was Curtis Kimball. It was for the murder and dismemberment of his wife at the time. This was in 2002. And she was called Unsoon Jun. My apologies if I said that wrong. Unsoon Jun was a chemist from California, and she was one of the first victims that they were actually able to tie to Terry Rasmussen. She was in her mid-40s and introduced her family to a new boyfriend, Larry Vanner, whom later identified as Terry. And Jun disappeared in June of 2002, about 2 years after Vanner had actually met her family and friends. And when they would try and contact her, he would say things like she's busy taking care of her mother, or she's gone getting some help, or she doesn't want you in their life, or anything basically. While the police were actually looking for her, they ended up looking through his Californian home, and they found this massive pile of cat litter in a crawl space, like 4 or 5 feet around and 2 to 3 foot high. And then one of the detectives remembers seeing an axe leaned up there. Buried in the cat litter, police found a human foot, which was completely mummified, wearing a flip-flop, and ultimately that was identified as Jun. She died of blunt force trauma to the head. Of course, he died of natural causes in 2010, and his identity as Terry Rasmussen wouldn't even be revealed until 2017. Let me tell you a little bit about Terry Rasmussen. He was born in 1943, and he was from Denver in Colorado. In 1968, he got married and had 4 children between 1969 and 1972. He ended up living in Phoenix, Arizona, in Redwood, California. His wife actually left him between 73 and 74, and his family did see him last around Christmas of 74. One of his children from his marriage provided the DNA sample that confirmed Rasmussen as Evans in 2017. And he was actually known, so he's a serial killer. He was actually known as the Chameleon Killer, and is believed to have at least used 5 different aliases in the decades-long run of his kills. And that at least he has committed 5 homicides, and potentially more. Another possible victim was a woman called Denise Budin. In 1981, she went missing shortly after Thanksgiving with her 6-month-old daughter, and her boyfriend was Terry, whom she had known as Robert T. Evans. Sadly, her father doesn't think that she will ever be found, but he always lives in hope. It was found out decades later that Denise Budin was the mother of a child known as Lisa. Lisa isn't her real name, it was just given to protect her identity, which was a little girl that Rasmussen claimed in the 1980s was his daughter, which a DNA test confirmed that it wasn't, and Denise has never been found. Lisa was taken into custody in 1986, and he was charged for abandonment. They asked her if she had any siblings. Police believed they might have been killed by him too. She said that she did, but they died from eating grass mushrooms when they were out camping. They believe that there's a lot more victims out there. So on the 29th of June 2019, the police held a press conference to reveal the identities of the victims. Malise Elizabeth Honeychurch was the lady, born in 1954, and she was the mother of Marie Elizabeth Fawn, who was born in 71, and Sarah Lynn McWaters, who was born in 77. They all went missing in Thanksgiving of 1978, and no one ever saw them again. And at the time, she was dating Terry. In September of 2025, New Hampshire police positively ID'd the middle child as Ray Rasmussen, which was Terry's daughter. I like it when the Doe cases get their names back. It's so amazing after all of this time that you know, people can still find this evidence and still get them solved and whatever after all of this time. It's just amazing, all of the work that goes into it, and everyone in the background who's just doing everything they can to try and give these people their names back and solve these cold cases and things like that. It's just absolutely amazing. And yeah, but yeah, that is the end of this case. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.